What's up, guys, and welcome to my 2024 MSI preview. This is going to be a little bit of a different format than usual. Normally, I'm just listing off the teams. I do a tier list and then I just talk about them in depth. But for this video, I wanted to do something a little bit different since I have a little bit more free time because I'm taking a break from streaming right now. What we ended up doing is we did our tier list like normal, but we also spend a lot of time shadowboxing the teams against each other. So I'm taking each of the top teams that I believe will be going deep in the tournament and talking about how they would interact with the other top teams and how I believe these matchups to go. I think that this is a way to provide like more value, more content for people watching so they know what to expect later on in the tournament. And then to do this, we also used a bunch of clips. So we talk about strengths and weaknesses of a lot of the teams and we show clips of what I'm talking about throughout the video. So this is why it took a little bit longer compiling all the clips. I think there's probably like over like 30 clips in this video or something close to that, and explaining why these plays that these teams are going for could be effective or ineffective versus the other teams that they're playing against. So hopefully you guys enjoy this new format. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video. Let's get into it. First things first, let's look at the format for MSI. We've got only BO3s and best of fives, no BO1s in this video. And yeah, I mean, I think that in general, this is the best format that we have in League of Legends right now. The best of three play-in stage doesn't matter too much. I mean, Fly PSG, I think, is the main thing that people are going to be looking at. Whoever ends up going on from the first round, they're probably going to end up meeting again in the lower bracket qualification match because T1 is just going to stomp whoever makes it in the upper bracket. And that's going to be the main thing that you're looking forward to in play-ins. I don't think there's a realistic world where Fnatic could lose to Loud or Gam. Just doesn't seem plausible. So there's essentially one best of three that you're going to see twice. So I guess two best of threes that you're going to keep your eye on for play-ins. In the bracket stage, you have 14 best of fives to determine the winner of the tournament. I think this format is so sick. I absolutely love it. I was a notorious MSI hater in the past. I mean, I'm a hater of everything, right? But like MSI specifically, I really disliked the previous formats that we had pre-2023 because you'd essentially only get one best of five that mattered the entire tournament. Like, so you'd watch 66 best of ones. I think there was once where it was actually 69 best of ones because RNG had to replay 3 of their best of ones because of an issue that they had with ping. That was when they were actually playing from China during COVID. Now we have a bunch of best of fives. It's double elimination, really sick format, and it just makes for a bunch of hype best of fives. If you remember last year, we had Gen.G versus T1. Then we had the BLG like miracle run where they beat Gen.G and T1, made it to finals versus Gen.G. It was just a really sick tournament, really fun to watch, and I'm hoping that it's just as good. Now, if you are here just for the tier list, boom, there it is. You can leave the video, bro. I don't really care about the tier list. Most people are going to have a similar tier list. There's not too many takes you can have. I mean, unless you want to go double of mode and then put Gen.G, T1, BLG a tier down, like whatever. Just a joke, bro. But generally, there's not too much you can do with this tier list. There's just not enough good teams at the tournament to have some really spicy takes. I tried to divvy it up more into tiers. So like, I do think that T1 is a tier above top esports. I didn't want to just throw them in the same tier because it's like, oh, the 2 Korean teams and the 2 Chinese teams are just better than everyone else. I do think that there's a difference between BLG, Gen.G, that level, and then T1 one level under, top esports one level under that, and then G2 is better than the rest of the Western teams at the tournament. PSG I didn't really watch. I mean, we could just like throw this anywhere. This is bullshit. I'm just telling you right now, I barely watched them. I watched some of their matches, like when they were playing versus Evi, because, you know, I was the Evi hater last year in finals of PCS, but I haven't watched enough to like really know how good this team is. So you can pretty much like discredit my placement here. Maybe PSG ends up here. Maybe they end up like being under G2, maybe they end up being lower, doesn't matter. But I think G2 is better than the rest of the Western teams. I think Fnatic is being really overrated by people recently. They had a close final versus G2 when there was all those lane swaps and the final was just really like a messy final. I don't actually believe that Fnatic is that good, so I do have them under TL. I think FlyQuest is also getting overrated by people, and I think TL has been generally underrated, so we'll get more into this later. I do believe that Loud is going to be better than Gam and Estral. I did watch a little bit of Gam just because of the hilariousness of the VCS match fixing saga where they had a bunch of subs end up playing, and I watched some Estral Esports with Jose Diodo. I don't think either of these teams should be able to do anything. They should probably be eliminated first in either of their groups. So that's the tier list. Okay, BLG. So why do I have them first? So BLG is the best team in the world at playing strong bot lanes. I think they have the best bot lane in the world and diving bot lane. I think that this is such an important thing to be good at right now because it is a bot lane centric meta. Now Rek'Sai should be dead, I believe. I hope it's going to be dead on 14-8. Maybe it's playable into melee matchups. We have to see. Udyr might end up coming back as a replacement for Rek'Sai. We have Renekton, who's being played right now as a weak side top. K'Sante still being played. Zac being played into K'Sante. We just have generally a weak side top lane meta. A lot of the carries top lane are not very good. I do think BLG would be able to play top side if they needed to. I mean, Bin has been one of the best carry players in the world for years, but right now is a bot lane focused meta, and BLG just play a standard bot lane focused game. Not only do they play all the strong bot lanes in the game, they play Varus Ashe, they play Varus with Nico even, we saw that in finals. They play all the Kalista lanes, including like Camille Kalista, Caitlyn Lux. They play Senna lanes, they can play Lucian Nami, best Lucian Nami duo lane in the world. They have the ability to play Jinx and Zeri. We saw that at the last MSI. We saw that during LPL. And they essentially just have no real weaknesses when it comes to how they play bot lane. They have exact knowledge of almost all the bot lane matchups. Like, they'll play matchups better than you even knew were possible. I mean, there was one that I'll show you here where they were playing Camille Kalista against Draven Thresh. And the way that most people view this matchup is that Camille is not that great into Thresh because Thresh can flay the Camille out of the Camille's E. What we learned is that you can actually start W level 1 on Camille and just heal at them for movement speed, run at the Draven and get both sums. That's a crazy way to play that lane. And this is a repeatable thing for BLG. They play all these lanes so well. They understand the specifics of all the matchups extremely well, and they play freely and aggressive, knowing that their jungler is going to be bot every single time before the enemy jungle, and it just happens. Like, they understand how to invade, how to split the map, how to put themselves in positions to dive on specific timers, and they execute these dives and get ahead frequently. And I think that this is a huge strength, especially when you consider the other teams that are at this tournament. I think maybe HLE has a bot lane that could contend with this, but Gen.G's weakness is their bot lane. T1 weakness can be their bot lane depending on what drafts they end up playing, and TS, their bot lane is a strength, but BLG's bot lane is just straight up better, which is why it's so hard for top esports to beat BLG, because normally top esports bot lane is winning. When they play against BLG, their bot lane is now losing and they're getting dove, and you know, things are just happening bot lane from Shun that make it extremely unplayable. They play weak side top almost every single game. Yes, Ben is on the team. He was pulling Jax bans in finals. That being said, he hasn't been playing that much Jax. He played his odd Jax games here and there, but generally he has just been weak side top laner. He's playing Renekton, he's playing Rek'Sai, he was playing Udyr during the split, he was playing K'Sante, he became one of the best K'Sante players, and he just plays weak side every single game. That's his role on the team, and he's started to master it. He's even been playing Gragas. The Bin Gragas was a meme for a while. He had some fucking terrible Gragas games in the past. His Gragas is now serviceable. I wouldn't be confident if he picked it in a really big game, but he's willing to play it. And I think that that just shows a lot of maturity with the team, that they are just trying to play the game and not have a bunch of people with egos playing their best playstyles. Knight is really consistent. He was the MVP of the league. I know some people might say that he was kind of weak in finals, but I think there's easy ways to explain that. And yeah, I just think that the team is the most, well, I wouldn't say they're the most well-rounded. I just think that they have the biggest strengths, and they're generally going to be winning early games versus the entire field, I would think. If we're going to talk about some weaknesses for the team, they do sometimes grief their macro. Like, they do make some really boneheaded calls, and they do overforce in situations where they don't need to at times, which can lead into messy games. I think a lot of that depends on what champions they're playing. And I think another weakness that they have is that the meta right now revolves around Azir, and Knight doesn't really play the Azir well. He is willing to play it now. It's not like he can't play Azir. He played it twice in finals, but he's not good at Azir, and he's not particularly good at the counters to Azir either. Tried to pull out a Veigar game, was whatever. He played Aurelion Sol. His Aurelion Sol was nowhere close to as good as Chovy's, for example. And I think that this could be an angle for other teams to beat BLG, just being able to pick around Knight's champion pool and capitalize on some of the overforces of their team. Let's talk about Gen.G, and then we'll talk about the matchup, the perceived matchup between Gen.G and BLG. So Gen.G is very different, pretty much as different as you can be to BLG. The weakness of Gen.G is their bot lane. Their bot lane is stable sometimes, but a lot of times their bot lane has weak lane. They can fall behind. Like when they play Lucian Nami, it doesn't look anything close to how Elk and On play Lucian Nami. I think their best lanes are actually like Lulu lanes, like Lulu Aphelios is probably what I would say Gen.G is best at. They have consistent players everywhere, which is nice, and they are just the best macro team in the world. This was really evident in game 1 versus T1. The way that they played the lane assignments and lane swaps after certain items were purchased. In this game specifically, Zeus is playing Aatrox into Rumble. He comes back to lane with the Hex Drinker, and then Gen.G says, oh, this guy went a Hex Drinker. and our Rumble bought tier 2 boots, technically like tier 3 boots because he had boots of swiftness. Instantly, when that Hex Trigger was purchased, they swapped the bot lane top. They have the Rumble running bot lane. They're using the Rumble to clear waves with Rumble ult, and they're laning the bot lane, who's obviously building AD, versus the Aatrox that has Hex Shrinker. Just a masterclass. The way that they pulled this off is beautiful, and that's what I think Gen.G does better than anyone else. I can definitely see Gen.G playing versus BLG and beating BLG if BLG is not able to get these advantages. I don't think that lane swapping is actually as broken as people think it is. There's definitely some issues with lane swapping, but I do think that if Gen.G is able to utilize things like lane swapping and really good lane assignments versus BLG, they would have an advantage in that department. That's a good way to negate the strength of BLG. Talking more about Gen.G, we've got consistent players everywhere. Every player on the team is a good player. Some people will shit on Pays. I think Pays is going through a little bit of a slump, but I still respect him as a player. I think he's a solid player. He just doesn't have a great lane, and if they play straight up versus BLG in the bot lane, it could be rough when it comes to just straight up 2v2 laning. Chovy is just a time bomb. In every Gen.G game you watch, it just feels like it's only a matter of time before Chovy just wins the game. Like, that's how you feel when you watch this team. You're like, oh shit, he's getting stronger. Like, he's going to silent. Holy, that's a lot of CS. Oh, he's on 2.5 items before other people are even on 2. Oh, he's on 3 items before other people are on 2.5. Oh shit, he's at 4 or 5 items. Like, he's just going to take over the game. And then it gets to a point where he's so far ahead in experience and gold that he just takes over the entire game and wins it. Even in the games they lose, it's really scary because he has so much pressure in the game. Not only is he this scaling beast that he's always been really good at farming side lanes. He's always been good at laning mid. He understands matchups and spacing on a level that's higher than everyone else in the entire world. He is the best player in the world, by the way. He's also started to grow bigger balls, man. He has got confidence now. He is willing to make aggressive plays. He is a playmaker as well. This guy is playing League of Legends at the highest level I've ever seen when it comes to just individual play. I'm not saying he's the greatest player of all time, right? I know people will try to like twist this, but in terms of just ability, if you were to take every single aspect of League of Legends, laning, team fighting, CSing, side lane management, skill shot accuracy, map understanding, everything, like you get my point. Take every part of League of Legends and average it out. I think Chovy is playing at the highest level. If you were to rate everything, he's playing at the highest level we've ever seen. So I love watching him, man. I really do hope that he gets an international title sometime soon so that people will shut the fuck up about the narrative of him being an international choker. I mean, he hasn't played as insane internationally as he does domestically, but it's like everything. The narrative just becomes so ridiculous that people act like he's like playing at like a 1 out of 10 level internationally, and then domestically he's a 10 out of 10, 11 out of 10. It's not that severe. He's played a little bit under his level. He's also had times where his teammates are letting him down internationally, so I wouldn't just put his failure to win internationally solely on him. When it comes to how Gen.G plays the map, they funnel gold and they play really well around certain conditions. So for example, Aurelion Sol stacking. This was something I saw Gen.G do that I've never seen any other team in the world do around Aurelion Sol stacks. So the way Aurelion Sol stacks with his E work, and it's really important, by the way, to get your stacks so you can get your super ult in team fights. It is a team fight game defining ability. Is that Chovy would go out and he would push the side lane as hard as possible with Aurelion Sol. And then once he's collected all those minions, he's gained all those stacks from the minions, he'll go and he'll throw his E on his teammates' waves, let them farm it. He won't take their experience. He won't take their farm. He'll let them farm it, but he'll have the CS within the E so that he'll gain the stacks for that CS, which I think is really intelligent. And this is why I think they are the best team at playing Aurelion Sol in the entire world. Chovy just has big ult for like every single fight, bro. He always has his super ult. Where other Aurelion Sols, it's like we saw when Knight played it, there's like a 10-minute window where he doesn't have it, or like a 7-minute window where it feels like, okay, they had to give Baron, they have to give like Soul, they have to give all these things because they just don't have the super ult. So not only does Chovy play the Azir, the tank Azir, engage Azir at the highest level in the world, he also plays the counters to Azir at the highest level in the world. Aurelion Sol, he plays Corki. Like, I don't think anyone else in this tournament should pick Corki besides for Chovy. Maybe you could argue Faker should play it. I like Faker more when he's playing control mages and things like that. I don't really like his Corki. I don't think it's at the same level as Chovy's. When it comes to how Gen.G plays the game, I think that if they end up in even games versus BLG T1 top esports, they should probably win almost every single time. They should be always winning because they're going to always come in with a gold lead because they understand how to generate more gold in side lanes than anyone else. The thing that I would say, like I said earlier, is they play generally low risk. They're risk adverse when it comes to skirmishes, and they're very susceptible to multi-man plays. I feel like Gen.G's weakness is that they don't respond well when you like 4-man dive or you 2-man crash a wave and dive. They're very willing to just let you have that play and then try to gain something on the other side of the map, try to gain something mid, try to gain something top. They're very, very willing to do this in games, but I think versus the best teams in the world that also understand to not let you cross map and just take everything, it's very hard to give enemy teams free plays. So although I do speak really highly of Gen.G, I have them S+ tier. If they win the tournament, not surprised at all. Like, I'd be like, okay, they're the best team in the world, they deserve it. The reason why I think that they're slightly worse than BLG is when I put them against each other and I think about how good BLG is generating those advantages, how those advantages match up into Gen.G. I think that is really hard for Gen.G to deal with. Also, I don't believe that Chovy is going to be able to just like booty blast Knight all over the place. I think that if Knight is playing his champions that he's good at, if he's playing Talia, he's playing Ahri, whatever, like Silas, whatever Knight wants to play, any of his known champions, Syndra, I think that he is going to be able to lane at a level where Chovy is not going to be able to run him over, and the bot lane will just be bleeding out, and it'll be very hard for Gen.G to get to the point where Chovy just carries the game. I think there's two ways that you approach Gen.G. Either you try to shut down Chovy, which generally doesn't work, but you can give him a harder look, give him a harder game to play. You either try to shut down Chovy or you just hard dive bot lane over and over. And I think that BLG will be able to do the latter extremely well. Moving on, T1. I know I'm not going to just blindly hate them just for the video. I'm going to make it a honest analysis, the best I can do. T1 is a super interesting team. The reason why I think T1 is so interesting when they're on form is the fact that they play League differently than anyone else in the world. Generally what they do is they pick a strong side bot lane and a strong side top. So you know how when I was talking about BLG, they're always weak siding top. Bin is just playing like his, weak side champions. Even if they're carries like Redectin, he's not playing with attention. T1 will play like hyper counter carries top lane, and they'll pick super strong bot lanes. So they're going to pick two really aggressive side lanes, and they're going to have their mid and jungle try to facilitate those side lanes. So you'll have Zeus playing, Vayne top. I mean, his TF top is getting banned a ton. His Yone into Aatrox was a huge thing at Worlds. One of the main reasons that they were able to win Worlds is that Aatrox was considered OP and Zeus had the best counter. And T1 will just play aggressively top and aggressively bot lane at the same time, and they'll kind of dare you to go and gank Zeus. Generally, they'll be hovering bot. They'll let their bot lane play as aggressively as they need to, potentially dive, potentially just gank it, allow Keria and Guma to do their thing. And Zeus will just play without vision really as aggressively as he can. And if he ends up dying, he'll play in a way where his wave is in a good enough state that he'll TB back and it won't really affect his matchup. And once he gets to a certain point in a lot of these matchups, he will just win no matter what. It doesn't matter if you get zoned off some CS or you even go even in the lane as Vayne versus Rek'Sai. If you're playing Vayne versus Rek'Sai or Yone versus Aatrox, you just get to the point where you f them up eventually. And Zeus is a good enough player that he won't ever die on like super bad waves. I mean, I shouldn't say won't ever. Rarely does he die on super bad waves. He does die a lot, but he'll die where it doesn't affect the game. It's like good deaths pretty much, or like times where you're just allowed to die. He's one of the only top laners that understands this concept, and they will just let him keep on laning. And then one time during the game, Faker or Owner, somebody will go up there and just give him one positive play, and then he'll just be Thanos for the rest of the game. It's a very interesting play style. No other teams really play like strong side top and strong side bot at the same time. It doesn't really make sense, right? Your jungler can only be on one side of the map, but they do things like Owner will gank bot and then Faker will go and cover top. They're really smart about how they get out of these situations. So that's what I think is so good about T1. And if they have good champion pools and they're on form, we saw it last year, they can just be the best team in the world. I wouldn't be surprised if their players are in better individual forms, like Keria, Zeus playing it in their top forms. I would not be surprised if T1 just wins this tournament. That being said, they have been struggling a lot. Like Zeus has been running it down. I think it almost looks like he's tilted a lot of the time from just getting ganked so much, getting pressured so much, and his team not answering in other places. But he has been dying way too much. I mean, his isolated deaths, I know you've heard probably Cadril talk about it. You've seen the stats on broadcast. It's like his isolated deaths is just at a ridiculous level. It's like more than you'd ever expect. He is actually just the shy at this point. And on the other side of things, Keria has been extremely weird to watch. The thing that made Keria so great before was that he could play all the aggressive 2v2 lanes, like the normal 2v2 standard meta picks, Nautilus, Rakan, these types of picks. But then also he had the Ashe. He was able to play all the AD counter pick range supports. Right now, he's really good at playing like Nico with Kalista. The problem right now is that he doesn't play the standard champions well at all. Like if you go and you look at his games, and like what he's been playing recently. It's like his Nico has been good. His Nami is whatever. Like Lulu, like they're just not great at playing these lanes together. I wouldn't necessarily put it on Keria, but his Rakan has been downright bad. Like, I mean, you can't really tell much from scores. If you watch the games, his Rakan, I think, has been downright bad. His Nautilus has been really, really sus. He's had some very, very bad Nautilus games. So it's been very hard to, give him credit for being the player he used to be. It feels like right now they need to index him into these weird picks. He looks good still when he's playing Nico with Kalista. He looks good when he's playing Ornn, Sejuani, Tom, Mao, Nautilus. When he plays those champions with Senna, he looks good and he's getting farm. But when he's just playing, engaged champs on his own, doesn't look as good. Also, I would say that Guma is not super good at Zeri. Zeri's been a meta pick. That's something that also hurts their bot lane. It just feels like a lot of the meta bot lanes they aren't very practiced on. They can play Varus extremely well. You don't ever want to give them Varus Ashe. You generally don't want to give them Senna. Don't really want to give them Nico lanes, but you have to give them something. But in general, if they are forced onto Lucian Nami, if they're forced onto Lulu Aphelios, if they're forced onto Zyra Khan, or when they played Camille support, it didn't look good. If they're forced onto these normal lanes, they just aren't scary anymore. And when T1's at their best, their bot lane is scary, and Zeus is also applying pressure on the other side, so it feels like, what are we going to do? Both these lanes are losing. We can only visit one, and eventually they just overtake you. Some of the other strengths of T1 I should mention at least are the way that they play around Baron. They're very good at understanding when they need to start Baron to have a chance of playing the game. If they're behind, they will walk to Baron and just start that shit in your face and force you to make a decision on whether you're contesting it. They do a lot of interesting things when it comes to using Spellbook. They'll do like double smite with Spellbook. We've seen this a couple times from them. We've seen them this previously, even going as far back as last year. And they'll just put the pressure on you to make decisions around Baron, which is what a lot of teams struggle with. So I do respect that about T1. I just think that they've been having too much variance in their games recently for my taste, and they just don't look like they're in super good individual form. Now, weirdly enough, I think that because when T1's in form, their bot lane is so good, they can contend with BLG at their top form a lot easier than Gen.G can, because Gen.G has a weak bot lane. When T1's playing well bot lane, I think that they're like one of the best bot lanes in the world. Similar to when you look at like, Elk recently, you look at Elk and on how they've been playing. They have very good understanding of like kill thresholds, lane pressure. They generate big CS leads. So T1 I could see matching up versus BLG better than Gen.G can. That being said, because Gen.G generally play like weak side mid, which is a weird way to phrase it, but generally they don't show attention to Faker. They just like let Faker lane 1v1, and he's mainly looking to like help other people. Even when he plays Orianna, even when he plays Azir, he functions as a playmaker for the team. It's very hard for them to beat Gen.G because Chovy just ends up being so fucking strong in like every game. You just eventually feel like he's too big and he's just going to completely carry the game. So that is the main reason I think that T1 struggles so much versus Gen.G is they're not good at pressuring mid. That is not what their team is built to do. And you need to have some degree of pressure mid, or you need to be perma-diving bot. And I feel like T1's playstyle is more about like outlaning you 2v2, outlaning you 1v1, and like ganking when it's effective than having really like calculated bot dives the same way BLG has. It feels like they just win bot 2v2. They don't really incorporate their jungler much. Also, I would say this team lives and dies by owner. Like when owner is playing well, they're one of the best teams in the world. They maybe are the best team in the world. When owner is playing poorly, which he does sometimes, it's just rough. We saw it at the last MSI. We saw it during summer. We saw it even at times during the spring split. When owner is playing poorly, it's really rough for this team. So we'll have to see what form they come into at MSI. Generally, I don't think that they should place higher than Gen.G and BLG. I don't think they should make finals. Wouldn't be super surprised if they did, but I do think that it is less likely for them to play against both of those teams and win. The next team, final Asian team that I have, Top Esports. So Top Esports is the weakest Asian team, I believe, at this tournament. 369 is still super good. I think 369 is just the best top laner in the entire world. He can play carries. He can do everything top side. He doesn't play like the specific niche counter pick carries. Like the carries that he's playing, Urgot, he plays a lot of Renekton. He can play Aatrox. Like these are the champions that he's very comfortable carrying the game on. And he can also just play weak side better than anyone. Like he can pick the Ornn. He's the best Ornn in the world to me. He's the best Gragas in the world to me. Just insane player. Like one of my favorite players to watch. Also, Top Esports, they have a strong bot lane in 2v2 lanes. They play very aggressive lanes. Varus Ashe. They play Kalista lanes. They play Draven lanes. Good Draven player. Jackie Love is just a really good Draven player. And they also play Senna lanes pretty well, which is interesting because you wouldn't think of Jackie Love as a Senna player. One thing I want to put out there is that there's a narrative that Jackie Love just flashes forward and ints every single game. It's so overplayed, man. it's so overplayed. It's kind of like the Chovy international choker thing. Sometimes Jackie Love flashes forward. Most of the time, he's not flashing forward and solo losing the team the game. He is extremely consistent. He was the second best AD carry in LPL over the course of the split. In regular season, he might have even been the best. I mean, this guy is insane. He's super underrated right now by the international community. You should just wait and watch this guy perform at this tournament. I think that he is really, really talented and people should give him more respect. When you look at top esports, I would say the main weakness of the team is that when Tien is bad, he is like worse than Owner. He is maybe the worst jungler in this tournament bad out of the reasonable teams. He just has some horrible games, and sometimes he just looks lost. It just feels like he's not doing anything in the game at all, and that can lead to the team having very like sloppy macro, just feeling like it's just a 4v5. They go for a lot of plays that just don't work out. I mean, there's one that I'll show you here from BLG when they played against BLG where they go for a bot dive that just should never work, and then they just lose the whole game over it. So they don't have set plays, and sometimes their eye for the game is not there. It feels like they're doing things because it's like the right decision, but they're not calculating all the factors that they need to calculate in order to guarantee that the plays work. So that's an issue that I have with top esports. And then also their macro is pretty suspect. I mean, they had bad dragon setups versus a lot of teams during LPL regular season. Barons that just straight up lost the game, like the Baron versus FPX, completely lost the game. Horrible Baron, but they did get better at this during playoffs. It just they haven't been consistent enough during the regular season that I can say that I'm comfortable with them as a strong macro team. I don't think they'll be able to play dragon fights versus Gen.G. Versus BLG, their setups were still not great. And it feels like even if they were winning games versus T1 would just like force a Baron in their face and it would just catch top esports off guard and they would end up falling behind based off that. When I compare them to teams, it's kind of interesting, right? Because I think that they could match up well into T1 if Tien plays well, because Tien is a brain jungler. He's similar to Peanut. He's like a worse version of Peanut to me. And Peanut has always played pretty well into Owner. I think Owner struggles with junglers that are just making good decisions. Probably the weakness of Owner's gameplay would be decision making, and his strength would be his like insane mechanics. So I could see that being potentially Tien favored if Tien played really well. I just don't think that there's a high likelihood of him playing well. That's why I have them in a lower tier. Cream is no longer the melee assassin guy that most people remember him for in LPL. He is now just playing control mages. His Ahri is still good, but he is essentially just a control mage player. But I just don't think that that's his strength. He's not somebody who has, been playing this playstyle for a long time. Something kind of new to him since he joined top esports. So I think that they just need more time to get on the level of the other teams. I mean, they are the team that I guess have had the most changes in terms of like how they play. Yeah, they had 3 roster changes, which I guess technically Gen.G had 3 roster changes as well. But that being said, like Lehens had been on Gen.G before, I guess similar to 369, but it was a much different team back then. Lehens was on Gen.G before, and like Keen is just essentially a better version of Doran, and Canyon I think is an upgrade, and the things that Peanut was necessary for on Gen.G are being covered by like Chovy and Lehens. It seems like they just can cover all the shot calling that Peanut was really good at. So I would say Gen.G, even though they had a similar amount of roster changes, they didn't change as dramatically as this top esports team. Some of the players are relatively new. A player like Cream, he's 20 now, but he's still a new player overall when it comes to being in LPL. That's why I have them A tier. I don't think that they can macro with Gen.G. I think BLG is just straight up better. We saw this twice. We don't need to talk about this matchup. It's just unwinnable for top esports. And versus T1, I think that in general, Owner will probably outplay Tien. Maybe there's a chance that Tien ends up smurfing on him, but for the most part, I would say that T1 should be able to clean up top esports pretty handily. And we move on to G2. Okay, so G2, I have them over the other Western teams because I think that they have the highest peak out of all these Western teams. Caps is absolutely insane. And I think the thing that sets G2 apart from the other Western teams is their creativity, their willingness to think outside the box and solve situations and commit to their own ideas in a unique way, where when you look at other teams, it feels like, maybe not Fnatic is trying to be a better team. They just are kind of bad. But it feels like at least the NA teams are just like bad versions of the top Korean and Chinese teams. I like the G2 has their own thing going. I think lane swaps, even though I didn't like the lane swaps versus Fnatic because I feel like G2 could have just beat Fnatic straight up, I do like G2 potentially lane swapping versus teams like Gen.G, BLG, T1. I think this makes a lot of sense because in the standard game, G2 does make a lot of mistakes. I would say they make a lot of like really low quality like noob mistakes that when you see them do it, you're like, you're better than this G2. Why are you taking like a 3v4 in bot river when you don't have prio mid? It just doesn't make sense. A lot of the ways that they end up getting behind and a lot of the ways they lose games, like they get behind. If they do these types of mistakes versus the top teams, they will just straight up lose those games. Like top esports, T1, Gen.G, BLG. G2 makes really dumb mistakes, and they have catastrophes where like 3-4 people are dying, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, the game is just going to be completely over. They're not going to catch up the same way they do in EU consistently. And if they can lane swap and reduce the risk of these things happening, could be good for G2. I think they also overfight sometimes when behind. Like you see G2 take a lot of fights that are just not winnable fights. And even if they end up winning some of them in LEC, they're not realistic conclusions to what the fights should be. So once again, if they end up behind, I don't think they're just going to like outfight T1, top esports, Gen.G, BLG. I don't think that this is like a realistic way for them to win, which is why I have them in a lower tier. I think they could be top esports. Maybe they could beat T1, but they would need to be on form. They would have to be playing individually well on the day, and they would have to show up with things that other teams are not used to. Things they used to be good at. Cog, Braum. We saw some leaks and scrims today. Maybe those end up coming out. Maybe we end up seeing a Kog'Maw, Braum. Maybe we see, you know, the Tristana, Lulu, lane swap bullshit. Maybe they throw an angle at these teams that they're not used to, and that could be a way for them to gain some type of advantage. I just think that right now they just have not been clean. Just a lot of sloppy games, man. The series versus Fnatic. I even talked to G2 players afterwards. I saw them at a karaoke afterwards, and they said it was disgusting. They're like, yeah, this was a horrible, horrible series. So I think that they know that they can play way better than what they did. And, you know, if they play their best, maybe they have a chance. Maybe they have a chance. I like them better this year than I did last year because I felt like last year they relied on early game aggression and just stomping other teams with things like Draven and Kalista, which is not realistic when you play against better players. But now that they have, you know, some variety in their strategies, I think it could be better for them. Let's talk about TL. So TL, I think, is being underrated by a lot of teams. I don't think TL is bad, man. I think that they have decent pieces. APA can definitely be a liability at times, but right now it is APA meta, bro. He can play his Ziggs into whatever champions like in the meta mid. Like, he can play it into Zero, he can play it into whatever. He has the ability to play Talia, which is really meta. That's always been a champion that he's pretty good at. Asol is in the meta. He's really good at Asol. And his Azir is becoming like a little bit more passable. So I don't think that this is like a horrible time. I don't think this is going to be an embarrassing showing for TL. I do favor them over a team like Fnatic. The reason for that is because I think that TL is generally pretty disciplined with how they carry out their leads. Their macro is decent, and Fnatic just throws every single lead they get, man. Fnatic just cannot hold on to their fucking leads. It's so frustrating for me to watch Fnatic. So that's why I have TL ahead of them. I think their laning is pretty good. Their bot lane duo looked good in semifinals and finals. I think it's pretty hard to judge because they were playing against Masu and Busio, which is the weakness of FlyQuest. But that being said, I was impressed with how they play, and they have Impact, who always shows up at internationals. I do think Impact will play well against Oscar if they end up facing off. I think Oscar is the weakness right now of Fnatic. So let's jump into Fnatic. I know we're kind of talking about them both because they're in the same tier. Jun was really good in finals. I think Noah can be overly safe in team fights and not maximize DPS. Bro, I don't know what's going on with Humanoid. I feel like this guy should be good, but he just runs it so often nowadays. It feels really tough to watch. Razork is obviously the best player on the team. You know, he can play at an insane level. He is a ridiculous individual player, but Fnatic just looks like they're just not cohesive at all. There's just a major disconnect in how they want to play the games. They have the most tragedies. We talked about G2 tragedies where like 4 or 5 people die. This is like a every game occurrence for Fnatic, that they'll just have a catastrophe where the whole team just dies for no reason over nothing. And like the way that Fnatic loses games, they lose games so quick. If there's a game that they like could potentially battle back in, wait for item spike, something like that, feels like Fnatic is unwilling to like play for a specific fight or a specific item spike. They just walk into fights for no reason and die. And it's like, okay, I guess the game is just fucking over. They don't make the other team sweat for it at all. You get a small lead against Fnatic, they're just going to throw themselves at you and just lose the game instantly. And it's tough because I feel like the team should be better than that. I think Fnatic could have some good early games, but even if they have good early games, I can't see them having a good enough early game versus TES, T1, Gen.G, BLG, where they won't just throw the whole game in one fight. That's my read on them. FlyQuest, I think FlyQuest just simply lacks the firepower. Bot lane is essentially a rookie bot lane. I know Busio's played for a year, but they have a super young bot lane, and I don't think their bot lane will be able to get out of lane. Maybe their bot lane could lane against like Jun and Noah if Jun and Noah are having a bad day, but in general, I don't really see how FlyQuest can beat the best teams here. Jensen is just a control mage player. Inspired and Bwipo are good, but they're not good enough. They're not better than the top jungle of these top teams. So how does FlyQuest win? Seems pretty hard to me, man. PSG, like I said, didn't really watch them. We can throw this out of there. Like, we don't even need to include this in the tier list. But yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe PSG can beat FlyQuest. I'd be very surprised if they beat TL and Fnatic though, but who knows? All right, next team, Loud. So I actually watched Loud a decent amount. I watched probably more Loud than I should have. Loud is an interesting team. I don't think that they'll be able to execute the way they play versus the top teams or even better teams, even like the mid-tier teams in this MSI format. When you think about how Fnatic plays, how TL plays, how FlyQuest plays, even if they were able to make the bracket stage, the team is like, it reminds me of TSM when TSM used to win North America. Loud just shows up and wins because their jungler is pretty consistent. They don't make a lot of mistakes. Robo is kind of like the carry of the team, and eventually Loud will just make like slightly more decent decisions than the enemy team, and they'll win, and they won Brazil like that, but it wasn't convincing at all. And there's just massive holes in their gameplay. Like, they would need so many things to go right in order to win. Redbird is a huge liability. He can essentially only play engage. Yeah, he's just not good at playing like range supports at all, where there's a lot of range supports in the meta. Root is fine. He's a good player, but he's not like anything special. I'd say Tanones is decent. Robo is pretty much the star of the team, but the way that Robo had to play specifically in finals and even semifinals is he was playing a lot of Jax. He's playing to get through hard lanes with Jax and then like be more useful later on, which is not a recipe for success. I think that if he's going to find success at this tournament, he probably has to index more into how he used to play, which is like Olaf, Renekton, try to really like stomp people in lane and get advantages in lane and carry those, because they're not going to be able to just like sit around versus teams that are better than them and get a good fight later on. They just simply have way too poor fight selection, and their laning is not going to be good enough that they'll be entering these fights with like better champions on an even playing field. So that's that. And yeah, Gam Estral, they're flying home ASAP. So that's the video, guys. That is what we wanted to talk about here for MSI 2024. Hopefully you like this format where we're including more of the video clips and stuff like that. I'll be co-streaming the entirety of MSI 2024 on YouTube as well as Twitch. This will probably be my main test for if YouTube streaming is viable, because right now YouTube streaming, like I'm telling you, based on the viewership that I'm getting on YouTube, I would make maybe 4 or 5 times that amount on Twitch. So hopefully we can get some memberships going. I'll try to run more ads on YouTube, see if it's viable, because I like streaming on YouTube. I know there's a lot of people that prefer to watch on YouTube. I'm just trying to figure out a way that I can make it more financially viable, so I'm not like sacrificing 10k plus a month to stream on YouTube. So that's what we're going to be trying to do. So hopefully we can get some memberships. I'll try to play more ads on the YouTube, and we will see during MSI if we can make it a viable path, because I do enjoy doing it. Also, YouTube chat is way more chill. It seems like people are just vibing there. Like every time I check the chat, people are just asking questions or having a good time watching the games. It's way less combative than Twitch chat, so I enjoy streaming on YouTube. So hopefully we're able to do it. So hopefully you enjoyed this MSI tier list, the 2024 MSI tier list. Tried to put a lot of effort in with Jensen to make this the best preview and video possible, and we will see you guys on the next one. Might be a special one, we'll have to see. Peace.